Hello, everybody. We are back and we are alive again, here,
Again.
today. And today we are very excited because we're back, and two, we have a guest here named David Suich. Is that how you say your last name?
Suich.
Suich. Okay, I apologize. David Suich. And we were talking a little bit before the show, and I think it's going to be a great show. So I hope everyone.
Awesome show.
Yeah.
And I love the background. Everyone take a look at Dave's background. So
I don't think they could miss it, Renell. I don't know if you've seen it, but it is pretty amazing. I love it. He was telling us, he was telling us about where that kind of came from a little bit. Can you give us a little bit of insight on that, where it's the duplicate, right?
Yeah, my ex-wife broke her leg, and I had to go up and take care of her, and so it was quite a drive. So I decided to move in there and built a little tiny house in the backyard, 10 by 10, 100 square feet, and I had an outdoor kitchen, outdoor bathroom, outdoor shower. I just had sort of a desk and a little sink and bed in the room, and I was trying to cut corners, and instead of putting up drywall, I just covered the entire place, walls and ceiling, with tapestries, and we liked it so much when I showed it to my wife when we were just dating. She says, "Yeah, we got to do a room in the house like that." So now this has become we call it the psychedelic room. So.
Yeah, I mean it's given me visions here. So I mean that's beautiful.
And you always get prompted to do things, and sometimes you don't know why, because our guides and those in heaven plan things for us, and they probably knew that I was going to be giving talks. I've been on 70 or so shows, and so it works.
It does.
I've been on so many, I don't think I can remember how many.
Yeah, I've lost track myself, but yeah, it's a joy to be on the show. I appreciate the invite.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited because you're actually from Florida, and when I was there, they had a very small IONS group, and I've heard it's gotten quite big. So that's exciting.
Yeah, well, I'm actually from Texas. I went out to Florida to give a talk at one of the IONS, Space Coast IONS, which is a smaller group. I haven't been to the bigger group there, but I'm sure there's some bigger ones in Fort Lauderdale or Jacksonville. I'm actually in Jacksonville. That's probably the confusion why you said Florida. I'm in Jacksonville, Texas. It's a little town of 15,000 people. So I say Jacksonville, people assume Florida.
I would have.
Well,
I live on top of a mountain in the middle of the woods with my wife.
Boy, I'll tell you, I loved it in Florida. Awesome. I was more toward the Fort Lauderdale side, and not too far from Fort Lauderdale, more toward Fort Pierce. And boy, I just love Florida.
Oh, yeah, it's a beautiful place.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. But my family was too far away, so here I am. Decided to move closer to family. But you've spoken a lot for IONS. Tell us a little bit about your book and what brought you around to doing talks on near-death experience.
Well, I never planned to be a public speaker. So back in 1999, I came down with chronic tendonitis. I was 34 years old, and it started in my hands, and it moved to my feet, and then my jaw. So if I talked or I stood too long, it hurt. Then it got worse and worse over a 20-year period. It kind of came to a peak in around 2018, 19. And I left the big city, left LA after 40 years there, quit my corporate job, and, came out here to Texas, and I healed up. But, back in 2007, when I was about 8 years into the chronic pain, I'd been prayed for by churches and lots of people. I'd spent tens of thousands of dollars in doctors trying to heal myself, and nothing worked. And I became very depressed. I was a Christian back then. And I came to a conclusion that, either God's not real, or more likely, I'm the son he's embarrassed of. You're not obedient Christian. No. I don't love you. You're your embarrassment. I want nothing to do with you. I'm not going to heal you. And that was very painful. Yeah. And I clicked on a random YouTube video that came in my feed. Now, YouTube was only a couple of years old at this time. There were hardly any near-death experiences on YouTube. And it was about an atheist who died, saw the afterlife, and returned. And that got me started. And then I saw lots of individual testimonies of people who wrote books about their testimony, and quite a few high esoteric, spiritual books that if you were into the stuff, you could understand it. Otherwise, it was like Chinese arithmetic, it was right over my head. And I thought, well, somebody needs to write a spirituality 101. What do these near-death experiencers say? So that's how I got started writing my book. And when I started writing the book, and then it really snowballed because I'd tell people and they would say, oh, well, my neighbors has a friend that, said they had this experience, and I'd go interview them and things like that. So it's been a real blessing, and I'm real grateful to all the people who shared their NDEs because it completely changed and transformed my life. I mean, I spent most of my life in severe depression, 20 years in chronic pain, and now I wake up most mornings with a deep sense of peace and joy. And I still have my bad days just like anybody else, but the norm now is a pretty good life, and I have a healthy body. And it doesn't make sense for somebody who's, almost 60 to miraculously heal after 20 years of pain. But, miracles do happen. And part of it was the law of attraction. I started being positive. I started saying I'm healing every day, even though I only half believed it. And of course I did. And I'm real grateful for everybody out there who shared their testimonies because it's changed my life for the better.
So was it was there a moment where it just got better, or was it a slow progressive thing that happened over time?
It was a slow progressive thing. So when I first left California, I had bought a trailer, 17-foot trailer called a Winnebago Micro Mini, 2 words and they both mean small. And I lived in that trailer.
I remember that.
Tiny.
For 2 years. And it was that first 6 months I started to heal up. So I got a real strong message from my guides or heaven or whatever, God, I don't know, to get out of the big city, go live in a trailer. And that's when I got together with my wife, who was my ex-girlfriend at the time. I invited her to come with me. So she quit her job.
Oh, wow.
In Mexico, came up here to the U.S., and we lived in the trailer for a while. So,
man, that's.
Wow. So she lived in Mexico, huh?
She was born and raised in Mexico. Yeah, she's got a work permit here, and we're trying to get her residency. So,
no, I see. Wow. Yes, it is. It's amazing for the multi-million of immigrants that have come here. It's going to be horrendous. I don't think they really truly understand how costly it's going to be.
Yeah.
My daughter is married to a Korean, and they're married, but he's still trying to get a citizenship, and it's costly. He's already put, I think, $40,000 into it.
Man.
Oh wow! I don't feel so bad now. We've only got about $10,000 into it. $5,000 for the lawyer and some other fees the government charges. It hasn't been too bad, but yeah.
I mean, that's not a small, for me.
Not for me either.
No.
It's not cheap. It's definitely not cheap. So I'm amazed that so many came. Because I don't know how they'll make a living, to be honest with you, and try to become a full citizen here. But
yeah, it's tough for the people established here, but a lot of them are fleeing oppressive governments and situations, and I feel for them. But yeah,
it is.
Yeah,
the world out there right now could use a little more of the positivity that brought you so much healing. That's not the right way to put it, but it really interests me because I am in chronic pain every day. And I know Renelle is too, from
holy cow.
lots of trauma through her life, like physically and emotionally. But for me, it's very confusing as to where it's coming from and why. And so I've been on a mission for quite some time to try and alleviate that, because I got 5 kids, trying to move along in life, and it hasn't been easy to deal with. So, I mean, I kind of want to maybe we talk offline and get a little bit of some advice here, but or we do it here, whatever you feel comfortable with sharing. But
all right, well, I mean, I can tell you what I did, but I don't really know what caused my healing, but I can tell you there was a lot of changes, and maybe it'll help some people out there. They can try it. So the first thing was, there's this law of attraction they talk about, right? Mm-hmm. So whatever you focus on tends to manifest, and it's nothing new. I mean, before that, we would say, be careful what you wish for, right? Because it tends to happen. You're focusing on it. And then there's the old Latin saying, fortuna audente sinuvat, which means fortune favors the bold. You're bold, and it seems like good luck makes it happen. Well, no, it's because the person sets their intention with the boldness. And then, of course, there's the ancient Aramaic word abracadabra, which in recent centuries has been used by magicians to describe magic, but that wasn't its original meaning. It was originally used to describe this law of attraction, and it translates as, I will create as I speak. And so I started doing that. I started I couldn't lie to myself. I couldn't say I'm not in pain today when my body's riddled with pain. So what I would say is, even though I'm in pain right now, I know that every day I'm getting a little better. And the way the law of attraction works is it's not like this mindless, repetitive stuff. Like I'm healed, I'm healed. No, it's feeling the emotion of having that which you want. It's not saying I want, because if you say I want is a state of desiring and not having. You don't want to focus on that because you'll get more desiring of things you don't have. So you say, if somebody's looking for a spouse or whatever, you close your eyes, you imagine having that spouse and the good feelings, and you focus on those feelings. So I would lay down on my bed. I would imagine running through a forest, perfectly healthy and young. I moved out of the big city, moved out into the countryside on a 4-acre property, a house surrounded by the woods. I stopped eating junk food and processed food and ate only, natural, healthy food. I really disconnected myself from the chaos and the drama and the negativity of the world. I stopped watching the news, and it's a well-crafted fear report. The human consciousness is not meant to take on the chaos, suffering, and drama of an entire planet. And so I turned that off.
That's a good point. And
got my world much smaller. And then I started just trying to be very positive in my words and thoughts, because one of the very first things I heard in NDEs that confused me at first, but now I understand it, is they would come back and say, I had no idea how powerful my thoughts and words are. So, if I worried about money, I would say out loud, no, it's okay. You've never been without your basic necessities. You're going to be fine. You're going to be taken care of. And of course, when I did that for 6 months, I got this consulting job. An old partner I used to work with called me up and said, hey, I need some consulting on these power plants, which is what I used to do. And so, you use that law of attraction to make things happen. And that probably was part of it. But I think my wife was a big part of it. My guides told me that if I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do, to give these talks and to be a teacher, which one of the near-death experience interviews that I interviewed this guy, he said, oh, you're going to be a teacher. Of course, I was an engineer. I didn't believe that. She was my backup plan. So what you'll do in your pre-soul planning is if things aren't working well, they'll send somebody in. And she was sent in to kind of get me back on track, get me to believe in myself. I was a broken man when we got together, and she helped me heal. And
what kind of engineering did you do?
I'm a mechanical engineer specializing in a type of power plant called cogeneration, but I also work with solar, wind, microturbines, large turbines, IC engines, and anything with utility scale power plants.
I see. I married an engineer. That's why I ask.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, I know. Very unique breed, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
They're very different.
So did your wife know that she was sent in this kind of way, or was this just the attraction and her coming in and was sent spiritually?
Well, she's very intuitive. She doesn't get direct messages like I do, but she's very intuitive. So when we had met over 10 years ago, she knew that this was going to be the man she married.
Oh, wow.
And of course, after a couple of years, I broke up with her. I wasn't serious about it. Well, the timing wasn't right. Yeah. So often there's plans made, and, we as human beings want it now, right? The guy who says, God, give me patience, but, I need it right now.
Yeah,
that's
kind of the way we are,
right? And so she was very confused, and we went 3 years just kind of communicating by text messages. I was in the U.S., she was in Mexico. And I had to come around. I had to be ready, and I wasn't ready. And I went through this sort of traumatic period of my life and a big change. And when I came out of it, my entire life was very different. And then, of course, I was compatible for marriage and her. And she is just an angel of a woman. I am grateful to her every day of my life. And I kind of feel bad for these couples that argue and stuff like that and have a hard time. It's learning experience when you do that. But she is just a joy in my life. I mean, it's a rare moment when we argue or have a disagreement, and she pretty much gets what she wants because she's so good to me and she saved my life. I don't argue with her. I don't let little things bother me. I love her so much.
That's one of the, I think, secrets to having a decent marriage is, agreeing with your wife, and going along. Not to say that we don't have our own opinions and don't matter. We do, but it's that's kind of a little joke, but
takes compromise.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. And yeah, I can say some of the similar things.
Well, you were talking about the colors, and I kind of want to talk about this because this is something that when you got talking, it is so true. You cannot describe beyond, what the human eye sees, which are the primary colors and all the divisions of the primary,
Yeah.
other than black and gray and brown. But when it comes, of course, white is the combination, by the way, of all colors. So that is the one thing that we can see is the combination of all colors. But there are colors we can't see. And describe a little bit about what you learned about colors.
Yeah, so in the first level of heaven, it's kind of laid out like Earth, but just a lot more beautiful. There's roads, there's buildings, there's mountains, and lakes and trees that tower taller than our highest sequoias. There are flower gardens that the flowers glow with their own light, and they kind of vibrate and sing. Very beautiful. And one of the things people remarked about heaven was the beautiful colors of heaven, and they would say there was colors that don't exist here, beautiful, rich pastels. And it took me a while to figure it out, but one of the NDEs, he was an artist, and he died, and he said, well, we have three primary colors here on Earth: red, blue, and yellow, or sometimes red, blue, and green. And a mixture of those three colors form all the colors we can see. Well, in that first level of heaven, there are over 80 primary colors, so just the colors is a buffet for the senses. People come back and they say, one guy said, I saw the most beautiful green grass, a color of green we just don't have here, just amazing colors. And there's amazing music as well, and tones that we can't hear, and people's vision is enhanced. They can look at a flower on a mountain 100 miles away in that first level of heaven and count all the petals, and they can zoom in and see the molecules making it up.
Yep, that's exactly right.
360-degree vision. There's no blind spot back here behind you. You see all around.
Right, and you can go right into a flower. When you look at it, like when I was looking at one flower to learn this concept, and my grandmother was teaching that to me. And the ability to go right into the center of it, all the way down to a teeny tiny molecule and back out, was incredible.
Wow, that is you were the second testimony I've heard where the person merged sort of with the flower.
Yep. Yeah. And, merged with the grass and the trees. After that, it was like, I wanted to see everything and merge with everything. And the moment that you accept something is when it opens up. So it's like the key that unlocks the knowledge is that desire and that ability to accept what you're learning. And the moment that the acceptance comes, then the knowledge comes, and it becomes one. And nothing can stop you. I mean, nothing, not even heaven can stop you.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
But there's a waiting area that I'm sure you heard about.
Yes.
That people go to after they die. Tell a little bit about that.
Yeah, I want to hear that.
I haven't heard too much about the waiting area. I've heard it from a couple of testimonies. My aunt, when I started doing my near-death experience research, to my shock and surprise, when I told my aunt, I'm writing a book about this, she says, oh, well, I died when I gave birth to your cousin. I died in the hospital, and I was in heaven, and I was in this waiting area. And it was just sort of a room with a bunch of people, and I don't know exactly what they were waiting for, but the part I remember about that story is she's walking in, and there's this plant that looked like a common house plant. And as she walked in, the plant greeted her, hi. And she's like, you can talk. And it was all sort of mind-to-mind communication, it wasn't verbal. And the plant says, well, of course I can,
Because a non-NDEer, I hear that night, and I think a mouth appears and starts talking, but it wasn't like that. It was a direct...
It's direct
language. And of course, I've lost count of how many people have met their former pets in heaven, and they could have conversations with them and that kind of thing. So pretty fascinating stuff.
It's interesting because a lot of people do ask for their pets that died immediately, which is so fascinating to me, because for me, I didn't see anybody when I first got over to the waiting area, and it took a moment to remember my grandmother, who had passed away just a few months before. And so it took that to finally ignite in me to go, I know someone. And then she came.
Were there other people there at the time, or other things, or what was happening?
For me, it was just that garden area that was just filled with light.
Okay.
And it was just so, the light was brighter than the noonday sun.
Mm.
And I'm sure you've heard that, David, a lot. It is that light you can't describe either. The
No.
white light is just incredible. Um,
Now, was
or
your grandmother young and beautiful?
yes, she was.
Uh-huh.
She
Very
actually was,
common, yeah.
except that her hair was white.
Mm.
And the last time I had seen her, she had black hair and a little bit of white whisk of white. So to see her with all white hair, I had no idea.
While being young,
While being young and beautiful, and
is
my mother said, "Oh no, that's the way she looked when she died. You weren't here for the funeral, but her hair was white." So it was really, it was like an aha moment, even down to she was wearing a white dress that she was buried in, and she
mm,
was wearing that white dress. So it's interesting that what we seek for to wear. And I'm sure you heard a lot about this, and I want to hear what others have said about when they arrive, what they look like, and what they think about what they look like. Did you hear any experiences like that?
Oh, sure. Plenty of experiences. I remember early on in my research, this one woman, she said, well, I met my grandmother in heaven and I immediately recognized her. You can recognize people. You can recognize your great, 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 great grandmother that you've never seen. There's just a knowing, recognizing.
like a
She's
signature,
like a
It's
what?
an,
like
it's
a
an instant.
signature of a person.
Yeah, I don't know how it works, but they just know this is who this is.
Hmm.
Sort of like you look at a tree, you don't have to think, well, where do I know that that's called a tree and that's what it is? You just know.
Okay.
Anyway, she sees her grandmother and she goes, I recognized her, but it didn't look like my grandmother. I said, well, what do you mean? She says, well, my grandmother was this old woman with no teeth and wrinkled skin and, gray hair and hunched over. And, here in heaven, she was this beautiful 30-year-old woman with long black hair and she smiled. She had a full set of pearly white teeth. Now, some people arrive and they're just sort of a sphere or a ball of energy and consciousness. But one can appear, especially in the first level of heaven. There's not really levels. There's countless realms created by the collective group of souls in the realm. But
Okay.
in sort of that first level that we hear about, that's describable in human words. The higher levels are not. You can appear any way you want. So people tend to choose the best looking version of themselves. And of course, thoughts are things. That's another thing I hear in the NDE research. And so if a person dies and they were wearing a certain set of clothing, they will
They'll want to wear it.
manifest that clothing.
Right.
They'll tend to look like that. And then I even heard a testimony where this woman was in heaven and she saw this old man who had just arrived, and his mindset was, I'm an old man. And he met this spiritual being and was having a conversation. And as the being was explaining, you're in heaven, you can appear any way you want, she watched the appearance of this man change and become young.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, it's a variety of things, but basically it's because, you can shapeshift or appear any way you want. I even heard a testimony of a woman who was in heaven and speaking with this man, and the man explained, well, gender is just something you define on earth. God contains all that is masculine and feminine. And she said, I'll show you, or he says, I'll show you something. And it disappears and comes back. Now a woman, you can appear any way you want. You can appear as an animal if you want, because thoughts are things. So yeah, it's kind of interesting.
So how you perceive yourself kind of is how, and I guess you can perceive yourself in different ways at different times.
Uh-huh. And then,
So
so what? I'm sorry.
no, that was it.
Okay. And so there's even cases where one man, he was a big fan of the Apostle Peter. So Peter came to meet him and he probably appeared, for the purposes of meeting this guy the way he appeared on earth. So he says, yeah, I met the Apostle Peter and he was a bit shaggy looking, because he was a fisherman, right? So.
Well, what's so interesting is what I saw in the vast number of humans that went forever across these hillsides was how many of them wore the different clothing of their time,
Yes, I've heard that as well.
of their period of their time when they lived. So the desires of the clothes that they wanted to wear, they wore. Whether it was in the 1300s or BC, it was what they chose to wear, what they liked to wear
Well,
was what they
that
wore.
makes sense. I wear mostly clothes that I wore when I was, a teenager or young 20s. I'm a 90s boy, so it's a clothes I wear.
I swore I would never do that. When I got older, I'm not going to do that. But I
Yeah, I'm
find
not going to wear what I wear here on earth. I don't want to be in heaven wearing sweats and Crocs. Those are the two international symbols of a man who's given up on his looks.
You're speaking to a guy that most of the time wears slippers, so that's how I get around. I have little soles on the bottom of them. I know it's weird.
it's interesting that you were talking about good health and the power of manifestation. Actually, I knew both authors, Mark Victor Hansen and Jack Canfield, Chicken Soup for the Soul. And a lot of that is absolute correct. And a lot of times what we manifest isn't always what we thought we wanted. And one thing that I learned on the other side is the things that you seek for deeply in your soul are the things that are eternal and are the things that bring you joy.
Yes.
Like being able to hear the plants and get to learn who and what a plant is. And the energy and everything is a reflection of God and his love for it. And so once you learn that reflection of all things, then you're able to move and love. And love is not just an emotion, it's something far more powerful. And it's what makes everything run on the other side.
It's the fabric of the universe.
Yep. And it's amazing even to realize how powerful we really are. I don't think we understand how really, really powerful we are as human beings. We limit ourselves by our thoughts and our perceptions of what others think we are, or our own thoughts and our own doubts. And it's funny how we turn to doubt first and fear before we turn to the thought of love first. Love for God, love for self, love for the world around us, love of peace, love of health, gratitude. Those are all massive keys for opening up the heaven and miracles happening. Is in that simple understanding of accepting and changing our perceptions. So tell me a little bit about when a person dies. I'm sure you heard this, is what people think about their body when they look at it before going back to it.
Well, some people, when they come outside of their body, don't recognize their own body. There'll be an accident or maybe in the hospital or something like that, like a surgery gone wrong. And they'll be out of their body and they'll be saying, oh, look, there's a body down there. Oh, I hope that person's okay. And it takes them a while to recognize, oh, that's me. Others immediately recognize their own body, but they say that here on planet Earth, you only see yourself in 2D, in a mirror or on a TV screen or, in a picture on a phone or laptop. But over there, when you're out of your body, you see yourself in 3D and you look quite a bit different. So some people don't recognize their own body at first. Yeah.
That's kind of like when you're having a dream, and you can see yourself at the same time that you're seen from your eyes. So it's a weird perception thing, but is that what it's like? You can see both?
There are NDEs I've heard where there's sort of this dual consciousness where part of their spirit's inside their body and part is out.
Okay.
And so I have heard that happen. The dream analogy, I've heard that applied more towards what it's like when you die. So when you're dreaming, you think your dream world is real.
Yeah.
And, you can be having a nightmare and feeling awful. And then you wake up and then you say, oh, well, this is a much higher level of consciousness, much more real. I mean, there's nobody on earth who doubts which world is the real world. Nobody says, well, wait a minute. I have this world that I'm in at nighttime, And then, when I'm sleeping and I have this other world during the day, and nobody says, oh, how do I know that this daytime world is real? Maybe it's a hallucination. Well, no, it's obvious. And that's kind of how it is. You take this big step, like waking up from a dream, to a much higher level of consciousness. And people will ask these near-death experiencers, oh, were you like a ghost? And no, I was the opposite of a ghost. I felt more real, more alive than I've ever felt in my life, filled up with life, the height of consciousness in life. Your thoughts are clearer. Your mind is sort of more intelligent. You have this super intelligence. Some people have access to universal consciousness. They ask a question, the answer comes.
There's no hesitation.
Yeah, right. There's no delay between thought and action.
That was very hard when I came back, is that delay, to be able to access my thought or my being able to verbalize what I want to say. That clarity and that bouncing back and forth was just pure, just one continuous thought with being able to communicate.
And there is it instantly back too, so it's like
instantly.
Okay, so it's like a
boom, 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 boom. It's just instant. It's
impossible to have a misunderstanding with that mind-to-mind communication. You just can't. Because it's direct and it's non-linear, and so just a single block of information that's no time at all. We'll call it an instant, but that could take a week, a month, a year to explain to somebody. That's how efficient the communication in the afterlife is.
Wow.
It's just like, and then it can dovetail. If you allow yourself to think a thought that may be more important, like words. I learned that what words do and how powerful one word can be, and how that one word dovetails into another action, into another action, into another action.
That you're in control of, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just kind of
actually more in control than here. We're not always aware of the words we say here. It just sometimes it's whether we an accent we grew up with, or even accents or language, but all of that disappears there.
Wow.
And so one word is a universal word to all living things. And that word can be more powerful than you could ever imagine. Where here we use words like and, is, that, the words that describe, where you don't need those words to describe it there because it's pure knowledge.
Wow. That's something that I would love to experience.
And time disappears. You can't say what time it is. Because
that's something I hear over and over again. There's no time in the afterlife.
Yeah, there's no morning, noon, or night. There's no, I always say, and I've always asked this, even of near death, has anyone ever dreamed of nighttime? Have you ever dreamed of nighttime? Nobody's ever dreamed of nighttime that I have found yet. Isn't that interesting?
I've dreamed darkness.
But not nighttime. Like
not specifically.
Nighttime.
Yeah.
Like driving in your car at nighttime. Or walking outside at nighttime. It's fascinating to me that nobody's ever dreamed of nighttime.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't ever think I ever had a dream where it was nighttime.
Yeah, I'm trying to think through it too.
Yeah, it's interesting. We tap into something very powerful when we sleep that we don't when we're awake. And so our dreams are very, very powerful. It's a time when we can communicate with the other side. So whatever you're thinking before you go to bed, wherever you put your mind before you put yourself down to sleep, is what happens when you are awake at night, when you're dreaming, and in the next day.
So
that's how manifestation works.
That's a good thing to go back to. But that's different than when we go to the other side. We can perceive and see things in more detail, and then you come back here and it's
very limited,
and you said earlier in the day, this is why I want to bring it up. You said earlier to me today, Renelle, like literally like 3 hours ago, that it feels like a dream kind of when you're here.
Always.
Like,
Yeah,
like
I've heard
this
that
is
a
the
lot.
place that's not real.
Have you
People
heard
who
that
have
a lot?
NDEs say this is like the dream world. That was the real world up there. And of course, they
Yep.
describe a familiarity. Oh, I remember. This is where I came from. This is my true home. That was just a temporary adventure I was having down there on Earth. Yeah, I hear that a lot.
Yeah, it's just literally so true. Every time I wake up, I think I'm going to wake up and wake up to something more real.
Mm.
And when I wake up, I realize, oh, this is the other dream. Does that make any sense?
Yes.
Unless I've
Yeah, that
had a
makes sense.
connection with the other side, then it's, oh my gosh, I'm back here again when I wake up.
So when you say you can communicate with the other side while you're dreaming, how
Or
does that work? And
meditation.
have you heard similar things? Because I know it's probably a different process, and it probably feels completely different. But how does that look? What does that look like?
What on the others? Well, what I do is I'm also a counselor, as you are, Dave, and when I work with people, I do hypnotherapy, and when I guide them through the path that they would take if they were going to die, and so they literally, before they know it, have walked through a door to the other side. And many of them have a very hard time coming back. Do you remember that, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, there was a piece and a different feel. Now, I would imagine that, yeah, I mean, because that happened with me with Renelle. I mean, I don't think I had much of a choice because I didn't actually die, but
No, I brought you back.
yeah, but there was a feeling that was unlike other times and places.
Yeah,
So,
the moment you start counting is when the connection with the body and the spirit come back. So
okay.
usually when I start counting a number, then people start coming back because it's a measurement and everything is on a measurement. Everything. And you don't realize it unless you're paying attention to it, but you subconsciously measure the distance, and everything around you is a measurement. Does that make any
Oh,
sense? Like
yeah.
my computer is so far away, I could touch it this far away, or taste, hearing,
It's the
everything's
only way that we can interact with the world because that's the only way to kind of see it. We have to be able to do that, be able to move around, talk, all of it. So, yeah, that makes sense.
when everything is unlimited and limitless, like it is on the other side, that goes away. That It's funny how we spend probably, and I'm sure you probably heard about this too, Dave, is how often we spend way too much time worrying about taking care of our bodies, like going to the bathroom, like feeding ourselves, like getting dressed, staying warm, or cooling off. We spend a lot of time taking care of our bodies and our well-being.
Which is important so that we,
Yes.
can have a good experience here on life. But that's not how it is, I would imagine, on
Oh,
the other
from
side.
brushing, yeah, from brushing your teeth to, wiping the sweat off your brow. Or walking, or, moving our arms, moving our bodies is all about taking care of survival, where survival doesn't exist there. It's limitless. So you were right, Dave. What did you hear about age? We were talking about that earlier.
Well, because you can appear anywhere you want. There's really no age in heaven, but people have met. For instance, one woman showed up, and a little girl about 10 years old came up to her. So this little girl was probably appearing as a little girl just for the purposes of the interaction. And she said, "Hi, mommy." And the woman said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, sweetie. I'm not your mom. I don't have any children." And the little girl says, "Yeah, yes, you do. I'm the child you aborted. And of course, this woman started to cry because when she was a teenager, she had an abortion and had felt guilty about it. And her daughter said, "It's okay, Mommy, I forgave you. And besides, I really like it up here." So you'll see people choose an age to communicate or present a certain, concept. Like often when somebody says, "Oh, I met this sort of big, wise spirit," they kind of appear as an older spirit, to give the impression of who they are. So it's more of a reflection of the intention of the person and how they want to appear.
What about size? Can you become bigger?
Oh,
larger?
yeah.
Is
You can do anything you want.
Oh, wow.
Some people describe Jesus as being, 6 foot tall, and others say 8 foot tall.
Huh.
And some people have met angelic beings that were huge, and some met some beings in heaven that were very small. But it's just a role they take on, because in the higher levels there's no physical light body like there is in the lower realms of heaven, and so everything's probably more on an energetic level.
Now, everyone that you've talked to have been individuals that have chose to come back.
Yes.
What has been the dynamics of their choosing to come back?
Okay, so one of two things generally happens. They'll get to heaven and somebody will say, "Well, it's not your time. You're not done with the work that you set out to do down there. You have to go back." Now, that's not control. That's not being mean. Some people interpret it that way. But in their pre-soul planning, because you kind of plan out your earthly lives, you say, "Well, I'm going to stay down there this much time and I'm going to do this many things." And so it is per your own will from your higher self that they are sending you back. Now, others are told, "You finished your work. You did what you were supposed to do. You have a choice. You can stay here in heaven, or you can go back and do more work." And of course, they all say, "Well, I'm not going back there," because it's such an amazing place. People say things like, imagine the 100 happiest moments of your life. Put them all in one moment. You don't come close to how good it feels like to be there.
Oh, you have no desire to come back.
Yeah,
it's
really wants to come
hard
back.
It's hard to tell family that you forget them, but you do forget them because it's so beautiful. And it's so incredible that you forget about the life you just left.
Yeah, and even a mother with a newborn child will say, "Oh, my child will be fine. Somebody will take care of him."
Yes, that's exactly what I said. That's exactly what I said.
Yeah, the problem with you is you had one coming that hadn't been there. Yeah, it wasn't there yet.
Oh, you had one. Okay, see, wow.
So my son, when I saw him, is the size that he is exactly right now. And he looks exactly like he looked on the other side.
They showed you that this is going to be your son.
Oh, yeah. He came in. I was with my grandmother, who was my guide, and I didn't want to come back. There's no way, and my grandmother said, "But you have children." "Oh, someone can take care of them better than I could." And because I had a real low, and it hit me in that moment, my self-esteem as a mother was pretty low. I, in that moment, realized how I felt about not being good enough. And then my grandmother held her hand up for me to see someone walking in the path coming toward me. And this young man came up to me, and he put his arms around me, and I said, "Oh, Nathaniel." And it's amazing I knew his name. And he said, "Oh, Mom, please, I need you to go back." And then he told me his life path and the things he needed to accomplish. And he said, "I can't do it without you." I mean, somebody can take your place, but nobody will fit perfectly my needs like you will. And his heart, his spirit is exactly like he was on the other side. Just this, when things get really dark or chaotic, Nathaniel is the first person to come up, and he'll put his arms around you, and your ego just goes away. and you just melt and you go, okay, I give in.
And that kind of thing is very common. When the person says no, they're very wise in heaven. And so what they'll do is they'll show the person, this is what's going to be the benefits if you go back, or, if you don't go back, your son or your spouse or whoever's never going to get over it, and they're not going to be able to complete their mission. So they'll show you the benefits or what's going to happen. And then the person, if I heard their testimony, they decided to come back. So
no, so you did hear some testimonies about people who saw their spouse or saw how their children would turn out?
Future children, future spouse, future life. Oh, yes.
Do they see
events about future of Earth?
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Now tell me about that, because I did see the future and what would happen. What have you heard? A lot of people say that's generally true.
Well, true is something we have to be careful about, that word. And yes. The reason is this.
Because
whenever anybody, any soul from heaven or any spiritual guide or whatever, or near-death experiencer is shown the future, that is the likely potential future based on the way things are now. So it's like if I'm driving my car 70 miles an hour, south on this freeway, you can say, well, okay, an hour from now, he's going to be 70 miles south, and you can calculate right where I'll be. But I have free will. I can slow down, turn around, turn right or left. And so, the likely future for a long time for planet Earth was self-destruction. Revelation, Nostradamus, Mother Shipton, all that stuff was real. That's where we were heading. And thanks to a lot of help from above, we are not going to destroy ourselves now. We're going to become an ascended species. But what I've heard about the future, it's very spotty information. So I got to give a little disclaimer here to the listeners. When we talk about things like the importance of love, that we are all connected, that we have always existed and we always will, we're part of God. Those are things I have heard hundreds of times. In 17 years of research, I've heard around 1,200 testimonies. And so I have no doubt about that. The future, I've heard maybe 40 or 50 testimonies about the future, and it was only little bits and pieces. So I'll try and give you the best picture as near as I can put it together, and this involves some speculation. We are in a time of great change. So late 1980s, early 1990s, we passed a point where we decided not to destroy ourselves and become an ascended species. So a lot of planets with intelligent life, they go through this. In the future, the time, especially the time before 2012, will be known as the barbaric age, and we're just now coming out of it. So what's happening is there's been a paradigm on Earth for a long time, and fear has been the dominant energy. So we're in a fear-love duality where we kind of, go back and forth between these choices. And whether a person chooses to act out of fear or love is irrelevant. You learn from both. But the energy of fear was dominant, and what you talked about earlier, Renelle, was survival mode. And it was this: you attached yourself to a group, maybe a big family or a powerful city or something as big as the Roman Empire, and you made yourself as strong as possible, and then you took from others and oppressed others to survive. And if you didn't do that, it was like, well, what's wrong with you? Do you want to be the victim or do you want to survive? It's one or the other. What's it going to be? Well, there's a new paradigm now. And the new paradigm is that with our technology, the way we're talking now and these smartphones, with our ability to mass manufacture products very cheaply compared to the past, with our amazing communication skills and everything we have, there's a new paradigm. And that new paradigm is there is enough for everybody. We do not have to fight each other to survive. What we have to do is cooperate. And we have gotten into this mode of cutthroat competition because so many corporations and countries and political leaders and organizations and even religions are in survival mode. I got to do whatever I have to survive. If I've got to, charge you 3 times the cost, to repair your car that it takes, and you're going to pay it because you don't know any better, I'm going to get that money out of you. Well, we are in the process of waking up, realizing that we're more connected than separate, realizing that what near-death experiencers say. if you harm one individual, you harm everybody because we're all connected. You
That's
bring hope or joy to just one soul, it helps millions, it helps the planet. So as we're waking up to this and waking up to the power we have to change our reality and waking up to new ways of thinking, new technologies, as all this is happening, there's going to be a change because love is the dominant energy. So any government, corporation, organization, political entity, financial institution, anything that's not based on love and integrity is either going to have to change fairly quickly to be based on that. We're talking less than 150 years, or it's going to fail. So we're seeing the failing of old systems. We're seeing the degradation of politics. Have you ever seen politics so dysfunctional and divided in the United States?
No.
And of course, people are panicking. Some people are freaking out, because if you survey the world, it looks like everything's falling apart.
Yeah.
But what's happening is, it'd be like I've used this analogy in other shows. It's like if you've got this giant mansion that your extended family has lived in for generations. It's served you for hundreds of years. But now the wood's rotten, the plumbing's leaking, the electrical's faulty. When it rains outside, you got to put 50 buckets inside the house because the roof is leaking, and you just can't patch it up anymore. And now you've got to bulldoze it to make way for a new, bigger, better house that's going to serve you better. If you're a 5-year-old child in that house and your parents haven't told you what's going on, the day the bulldozers come and knock the house over, it's going to seem like the end of the world. And it's going to seem like everything's falling apart. And what's happening is, by necessity, as those old systems crumble, or some will change to adapt to the new world of love that's coming, by necessity, we will start cooperating. We will start forming small communities where instead of serving out of self for money, and then once I have the money, I pay you and make you do what I want. You're my slave when I need when I'm paying you, right? It's a total selfish system right now.
Yeah.
It's going to change. And very slowly, just like in the last 100 years, we've had more and more products cheaper and cheaper. It's going to go the other way. Less and less products, more and more expensive. And we'll go back to these little agrarian sort of small communities, 100, 150 people. We'll have high technology and manufacturing and remote automated cities, but we'll live very naturally. And we'll communicate with plants and animals. We'll have a relationship with them. We'll tell plants where to grow. We'll create beautiful gardens. We'll learn a lot from nature. We'll form partnerships with the animals and communicate with them telepathically. We will have spacefaring ships to visit other species. We will have relationships with beings on other planets, intelligent beings, by telepathic communication. No more smartphones. It's going to be like, hey, sweetie, you want to see if the kids want to come over for dinner tonight? Yeah, they said they're coming. It's going to be a different world. There's not going to be any more war. We're going to cooperate. There's going to be a massive effort to clean up the earth. The big Pacific garbage patch. They're going to clean that up. They're going to clean GMOs out of the food supply. We're going to develop clean energies. First, low temperature geothermal, and then 0-point energy. Little box that runs in your house, starts with a little battery, and it runs 50, 100 years with no maintenance. Our scientists are working on that now, by the way. They say that, forgetting all the spiritual stuff and NDE testimonies, they say there's enough energy in 1 cubic foot of space, enough 0-point energy to run the United States for a year. It's coming.
Wow.
So there's going to be this new world of love that's coming, but a change is never easy. And the faster you make the change, the more chaotic it is. And it's going to be about 50 years away from peace on earth, not set in stone. It can come faster or slower. About 150 years before this new world of love is here. I've heard it's going to be such a change. Look at the world 150 years ago. The world today is unrecognizable compared to 150 years ago. Horse and carriage, no electricity, farming communities. I mean, it's a different world today.
It is.
It's going to be so different that, like, if an alien showed up on the planet today and looked around, he would say, yep, you guys are going to destroy yourselves. You're trashing the environment. You're fighting each other. You're all screwed up. You got all these greedy, wealthy people, a bunch of others in poverty, 70,000 homeless people on the streets of Laos. You're gonna destroy yourselves. And if he came back 150 years from now, his jaw would drop. What did these human beings do? How did they clean up their act so fast? They made this place into a garden paradise. Oh my God. That kind of thing.
Yeah, and
that's the basic overview of the future.
I will say that, we because I'm still a Christian. I'm in a place of that, and that's not far off from what that my belief and what I've seen is just what is going to happen between now and then, and how bad does it get before it gets better, type stuff, right? Because people don't let go. They don't just let go of power in general. Now, the awakening, however fast that happens, because I believe that, I think a lot of us feel like there is a type of awakening, but it has to be accepted. And there's a lot of pushback on something like that. So what does it look like in your opinion? And this is opinion, speculation, everybody. This is not set in stone like he said. But I mean, what does that look like in between?
Well, there'll probably be some more wars. People
Yeah,
will
we
not
still
be able-
have World War III that will be fought on this continent.
Yeah.
Still have that coming.
I don't know if I would call what I've heard about World War III, but I've heard maybe half a dozen testimonies where they said China is going to invade. The United States will be divided into two countries. A weakened U.S., China will see that as an opportunity. They'll invade, I don't know, 40, 50 years from now, something like that, 40 years from now. And the U.S., Canada, and Mexico will fight together against China. War will last 7 years or so. And then that's going to be the beginning of world peace. And,
so your testimonies have gotten that specific.
Yeah, but I've heard specific stuff before that didn't come true because, free will, it can change. Yep. So there's no way of knowing for sure. But the overall theme seems to be we're not going to destroy ourselves, and this new world of love is coming. How it all happens and the details, I don't know, but I do know, I have heard this. It's not going to be the globalists and the ultra wealthy who are building underground bunkers with food stores that are going to prosper. The ones who are going to prosper are small communities or groups of people who start to cooperate with each other. So what that's going to look like is, as there's less and less things, you might have a community of 20, 30 people on this block, and they say, well, we don't all need our own lawnmower. So let's maintain 5 and share them among 20. And let's build a community garden. And let's start trading, and the idea of working for the man, in the corporate environment, that's slowly going to go away. It's going to be a slow thing. It's not going to be like overnight, all of a sudden there's chaos. The dance of consciousness is always one of 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Doesn't take much of a genius to see we're in a step back phase right now. But Cryon, channeled by Lee Carroll, says something that I like to quote. He says, get used to this acronym, SUCK. Slow, uncomfortable change, and we're in the middle of it now. But it doesn't mean anybody has to suffer because of us creating our own realities. If you say, even though there's chaos, even though there's going to be a degradation of the systems that we depend on, I will have an abundance of prosperity, financially, I will have an abundance of health, I will have good relationships, meaningful relationships with family and friends, I will have a good job with a valuable contribution to make to society. And, if you set your intention on those things, you don't have to be part of the chaos. You never have to be part of it if you don't want to be part of it. And so there's going to be a lot of people and areas that are going to prosper, and even some cities. A lot of cities are going to have problems, but there'll be some where they really cooperate. And, people who don't want to be part of the chaos are going to be led to places and guided to do things so they're not part of it. Now, some are going to want to be part of it, and that's okay. It's part of the learning process.
And so, okay, that I like that idea, being able to, and I think that it's so much easier to imagine the small group scenario, right? Being able to have love amongst these groups and being able to live a different kind of law instead of the law of need and greed and needing to take. And so that's the kind of thing that I want to be a part of.
Well, what's interesting, so I'm in an apartment complex here with my son, and across the way is a community garden.
Mm-hmm.
And,
wow.
Everyone, in advance, basically rents a little square box.
Mm.
But the
Like,
community garden is, even though it has the person's name and it has, their little plot, anyone who's hungry is allowed to go in there and take the food they need. And
mm.
it's funny because with that open invitation, there's always plenty of food in there, which is so fascinating to me. That and they never stop anybody from, and it's fascinating too to watch this little community garden, how everyone, if they see that the other one's unkept, they'll actually help to get that box into shape, if that person hasn't been to their box in a while. So there's always this very well kept garden and this cooperation. So much that they even put up swings now for families to come and just swing in the garden.
Mm.
Or they have also just boxes of books, in
Oh,
these little square areas where you can take a book and replace a book that you've read and exchange it out and leave it for the community.
I
So,
like that.
yeah, I've already been watching this grow, um, because somebody thought ahead enough to say, oh, we're in an apartment complex, we don't have a garden.
Mhm.
And
See,
I saw that back in Minnesota, same thing, bunch of apartments. It started with an Asian family next to the railroad track on land nobody wanted, and they started a community garden, and it just grew. And is nobody in that whole apartment complex has to worry about going to the store for certain foods because it's there.
oh, I love that. And it's so beautiful to hear stories like that because that's the beginning. That's the beginning of the change of this new world of love that's coming. And we're seeing it already. We're seeing community gardens sprout up. We're seeing farmers markets, locally grown. That wasn't a term, 50 years ago when I was a child. We're seeing things like the Madrigan Corporation in Europe, that if they were on the Fortune 500, they'd be one of the 100 largest companies in the world. And they're a co-op, a managerless corporation. The employees and the customers, they own the corporation. And we're going to see more of that. We're going to see in the future companies competing based on integrity. Look how good we are to our employees and customers, and look how well we treat the environment. And it'll be real advertising, not the fake advertising they have today, the lies. The politician, this is the hardest one. I'll probably lose half the audience right now. Oh, this guy's crazy. There's going to be politicians. This is a hard one for me to swallow, but I've heard it from heaven. In the future, there's going to be politicians based on integrity and
What?
love and cooperation. No more winner take all. Oh, this is what everybody wants. We all want, safe streets and good infrastructure and schools and hospitals and meaningful jobs. So,
I think we're already almost there.
we're
I
getting
think
close.
there are individuals who have an ideology, and they feel they have to go with the group. When
Mm,
there's a two-party system, you have to go with your group, and instead of the ideology of we're here to serve another
yes.
or here to serve out of love. And if we can let go of that ego, then the ideology goes away the moment you let go of ego. So the moment that we can let go of our own power base or our own ego, then I think our government will be completely different, as you said, of key components such as integrity and a reputation and respect and
Mm,
kindness, cooperation, all the things that work basis versus the duality, of the ideology of duality.
mm.
Um, I mean, we're going through that, believe it or not. I listen to C-SPAN all day long. I don't know why, but I do. I have an ear on the government. And I also listen to the European countries as well. And slowly it's slipping. The changes are happening. And even those who have been in politics for 20 years don't know how to grasp this new ideology, because it isn't an ideology anymore. It's a whole different change. And even the younger kids are struggling because they came in holding on to the old, or grabbing hold of the tail end of the old, and realizing they don't have to do it that way. There's still these younger kids that are coming into the House of Representatives still thinking they have to hold on to their party rather than standing on their own integrity. And
when we say young kids, you're meaning, you know.
Yeah, I'm old. Okay. Anything under my age is young.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm closer to Dave's age. I won't say, but I'm closer to Dave's age, and I'm older. Let's just put it that way. And everyone's younger.
Yeah, these near-death experiencers, some of them, when they're sent back, they're told before they get sent back, go back and change the world.
Yes.
And they say, "What?
Ronell was, yeah.
Change the world? I'm an engineer from Jacksonville, Texas. What am I going to do to change? I can't change the world." And they say, "No, it's really easy. The world's not going to change by electing benevolent politicians or passing a perfect set of laws to legislate a utopia, or, by putting all the bad guys behind bars. That's not how it's going to change." They explain it really simply. They go, "Listen, it's going to change by one act of love at a time. You go and you be the best version of yourself you can, treat your fellow man with kindness and compassion. That's going to make them a little better, raise their vibration, raise their consciousness, raise their level of love, and that's going to spread out."
And Ronell, what was the last thing your grandma said to you?
Love is the key.
Yeah. Love is the key. There it is.
Love is the key. Go back and tell everybody love is the key.
Yep.
And everything that I've done, I thought was nothing when I did them. Like IANDS, the International Association of Near-Death Studies. I mean, I was right in there with Kenneth Ring and Melvin Morris and Elizabeth Kubler-Ross when we started this. And look what happened. I didn't think anything would come of it. All I had to do is let go of my ego and let it grow. And look what happened. The Children's Burn Foundation, Stop, Drop, and Roll, all of the things that, was given birth to, the moment I let my ego go and let it go and gave it back to community, I watched it grow. It's when I didn't put my name behind it or put my ego behind it that it grew. I never dreamed that the International Near-Death Studies would grow so big, that it would go worldwide, or, just starting some of the core groups would become so huge. But as soon as my ego let go, and I think, too, in some of these groups, if some of the older people that have been in it forever can let go and trust, I think it grows bigger. And I watch that in politics. Some of these politicians that have been in their positions forever, for 30 and 40 years. Mm-hmm. The Constitution was designed not to do that. Remember?
Oh, yeah.
2 years at a time. President 4 years. There's a reason. And it's so that power base doesn't become so full of ideology and power driven and ego driven.
Controlling.
Yeah.
Controlling. Yep.
And I will say that we were brought up, and I think the entire world was affected by it because the way that America grew and it became, everything started to become Americanized. That's not a good term, but everything started becoming more and more about money and all this stuff throughout the world even. But we were kind of lied to in a lot of ways when it comes to this system working in this greed type way. And I mean, my generation, and younger really saw this and it started to wake up a little bit. I mean, I think it's probably started more in the 70s, a little bit earlier than me. But yeah, so I mean, I think there's been a lot of lies told to us that we have to do it a certain way. And so breaking free of that is kind of difficult, you know?
And I think
Sometimes.
that's why Elon Musk became and is so famous. Because of his disabilities, he's made him completely 100% of abilities, because he doesn't have that ego in him. And that's very hard, because when you're driven by ego, that's holding on to an old system, always holding on to an old system. That's hundreds of years old. It's not just 20 or 50 years old. It's hundreds of years old.
Thousands.
And so the moment we can let go of that and let God be in our lives, and allow him to inspire our minds, we're driven to innovation and doing something new and different. And the moment that we go outside of the box, then we're creating something far more beautiful and different.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a lot of aha moments as we wake up and go, why didn't we do this sooner?
Yeah.
Yeah, an epiphany, those living more on those epiphanies and living more on inspiration than aspiration.
Good way of putting it.
I think there are two things I kind of want to talk about before we break. The first is, and it's not just me. If you guys have topics, I just wanted to get these out there. When you talk about multiple heavens or different spheres, or however that looks, you talk about the first level, I guess I should say, is how you put it. In your experience and what you've seen, what does that look like? What does that mean?
Well, I'm a human being, so I think very linear, in a very linear way.
Yeah.
And that's just not
I can relate to that.
So it'd be like if I walked into the ocean and when I was 1 foot deep, I would say, oh, I'm at level 1 of the ocean. And I walk in a little more than 2 feet. Oh, I'm at level 2. It's like, well, now, so, is there a heaven and a hell? In my opinion, no. There's just countless number of realms that are created by the collective groups of souls that are there. And so that first level that we hear so much about in the NDEs, that's where a lot go because it's somewhat familiar. And, to go to the higher levels, it takes some preparation. And they're not really describable in human words. So, I know that based on the work you do in these physical lives and how well you do with the fear-love duality, every time the human being has a choice between love and fear, this person has done something horrible to me, I can respond compassionately, or I can respond by, striking back. And every time we make that choice of love, that's what helps grow the creation process. And as we do this, our consciousness raises, our vibration raises, and it allows us to access higher levels. And each level is more wondrous and glorious and beautiful and fascinating than the last. And it never ends because creation is continuously growing. Jesus says, what shall I compare the kingdom of heaven to? It's like a mustard seed that you plant in the ground and the tree grows up beautiful. Well, I think he's referring to the fact that creation continues to grow. It didn't end at day 7. Everything in nature grows. Trees grow, plants grow, cities grow, people grow, families grow, businesses grow. I mean, there's growth in everything. Why would we think that creation is static? Because it's as above, so below. So we get a little hint that it's not just us that's growing. God himself is God is perfect, but perfection doesn't mean you can't make something more elaborate and better and more enjoyable.
Or help other souls or types up. I mean,
yes.
I think that's probably his primary purpose in existence. So
yeah, we actually are continuously growing upward.
Yes, that's my understanding.
yeah, even on the other side, you're not stuck in one heaven. You are constantly growing and learning and constantly moving upward. And even in hell, there is a constant. And hell, from what I saw, was individuals being stuck.
Yeah, they were trapped. They're in that cycle of selfishness and their thoughts. Yeah, I've heard that.
Just this constant this reminiscence and ruminizing over the same sins and same limited thinking of everything that is, I hate to say it, everything that's darkness keeps you damned, and a dam holds you back, right?
Yes.
So that damnation is what holds you back.
Yeah, it's a choice to be there, is what I've heard or understood. And
Right.
It's very interesting, over 1,200 testimonies, and maybe about 3, 4, or 5%, I don't know, were negative or hellish experiences. And in every single case, and I just talked to another near-death experience researcher who said the same thing. In every single case, if that human being gets sort of out of that cycle of, self-pity and all that, and they call out to heaven for help, they're always rescued.
Always.
So myself and this other researcher said they never heard a single testimony of a person calling out to heaven for help and nothing happened.
I remember this one man that I spoke to who had one of the original near-death experiences, and he was an atheist. And it wasn't until he sang "God Bless America" he was able to get out of hell.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the very first NDE I ever heard was Howard Storm's, and he was an atheist.
That's it, Howard Storm.
It was Howard Storm, yeah. And he was in this dark place, sort of outside the gates of hell, and he'd been attacked by these evil entities.
Spirits,
and he was all in pain, and Jesus shows up. He thinks, well, I'm wrong. There obviously is an afterlife, and even though I don't want to be in this place, I lived a life of entirely selfishness, and so this is where I belong. And he's thinking about all this, and he's there for an eternity, time without end. And he thinks, well, what if what I believed as a child was right? 7-year-old child, and he remembers himself in Sunday school singing, "Jesus loves me." And he thinks, I don't know if Jesus is real, but I want to believe he's real. I don't know if God in heaven is real, but I want them to be real.
Yeah, I don't want to be here.
Yeah. And so with the last strength he has in that darkness, he calls out and he says, "Jesus, please save me." And then he sees this little light. And why didn't I see that star before? Because it was a totally dark place.
Yeah.
And then the star quickly gets brighter. And, it's brighter than 10,000 suns. Doesn't at all hurt his eyes. And then he can see his own body in that light that Jesus brought. And he said he was unrecognizable. He looked like roadkill. And Jesus reaches down and touches him and picks him up. And the moment he touched him, all the pain, all the fear, all the wounds just went away. And he's whole and healed. And of course, inside, just filled with God's love, which he said, I wish I could be more articulate about. It's so frustrating because it's the best thing that ever happened to me in life. It's like the all. It's the everything of life is to know that love. And he gets to it, and you can't explain it. And then they went up out of there, and they're moving towards this world of light. And he sees this beautiful place. He sees heaven, and he thinks they've made a mistake. I'm garbage. I'm filth. I'm scum. I spent my whole life being mean and cruel and selfish and manipulative, and I don't belong there. And they stopped. They weren't in heaven. They weren't in hell. They were in between. And Jesus looked at them and said, "We don't make mistakes. You belong here with us." Look at God's mercy. What did Jesus say when he was on the cross? The guy next to him spends his whole life being a thief. He doesn't ask for forgiveness. He doesn't ask to go to heaven. All he does is hint around at mercy. Can you remember me when you're in your Father's kingdom? And what did Jesus say? Today you'll be with me in paradise. What an amazing God we have.
Yeah.
And we should end it with that, because that is a beautiful statement. Because
one of them, yeah.
All we need to remember is the Savior saying, "And I shall see you in paradise."
Yes.
And we there are no shortcuts, folks. Don't try suicide. Those who've had those bad experiences are the suicide experiences.
They tend to have negative experiences. Yes, I've heard that.
Yeah, I've met too many near-death experiencers who have come back from suicide going, "What was I thinking?" Because there is no shortcut. And the absolute hell, darkness of hell is the absence of nothing. And you aren't nothing. You are everything. And with God, he sees everything in you. And every potentiality becomes the hope of everything.
Yeah, you know, everything I've learned in 17 years reinforces the one idea. When they asked Jesus, what's the greatest commandment? Love God and love your neighbor as yourself. Everything I've heard from NDEs reinforces that idea.
Yeah, think about it. When you're with people and you know you're going to die, it's interesting. When Jesus knew he was going to die, what did he do? He did the greatest act of service and love in those last moments. And that's where that scripture comes from in John 13:34, which is, as I have loved you, love one another. By this will all men know that you are my disciples, if ye have loved one to another. And so he's teaching that very concept. I just love his whole life was an example. And I know there are going to be atheists and Muslims that are going to watch this. I can only hope that you will let Christ, just for a moment, that light. If he's a rabbi and he's a teacher, then let it just be open to let that in for that moment, just for a moment to feel it. And we were talking earlier, you and I, Mike, that everything in the world can be duplicated, but there's one emotion that can't be duplicated. And what was it?
It was peace. Peace.
And that is also what Christ said. Peace I
give unto you.
Give to you. Yeah.
And what else?
Not as I giveth unto thee, but yeah.
Yeah, so peace I give unto you, not as the world giveth, but as I give unto you. So I say, please take that moment to feel peace, because peace is not a feeling that can be duplicated. And the only way is to be still. And I can't tell you how many places in the scriptures. Look at it, it's like hundreds of places where what's the one word that constantly is repeated? Be still and know that I am God. Be still. Just be still. Don't fight, don't pull, don't tug. Don't, right after I talked to Mike, I think it was at 5:00, and I go, I have time for prayer and meditation. I'm not kidding you. I was gone. The minute I closed for me, meditation is gone. Say prayer and gone. And I came to and looked at the clock and went, 10 minutes late.
I believe that peace is an expression of the energy of love.
Right. It's that surrender.
Yes. 1 Peter 4:8, love covers the multitude of sins. 1 John 4:7, everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. The Bible mentions love over 500 times. In the first chapter of John, it says God is love. So it's more than an emotion. It's more than an energy. It's the creative
God is
power.
And that wholeness of love, I am that I am. I love that. I am that I am. Teaching Moses, I am that I am. And that encompasses love. Love is the key. I am that I am.
I love the expression that you said. What an amazing God we have to love us in our fallen or weakened state, and the fact that He wants us to truly love ourselves and each other, and that, I believe, is an amazing way to end it. And everybody, remember, love those around you. Find reasons to be patient in love.
Let's talk about Dave's book. Dave, you've got a book.
Goodness.
You didn't have a chance to talk about your book.
All right. Well, let me see if I can
hold it up.
So this is it right here. It's called God Took My Clothes. And if you go to godtookmyclothes.com, you can download a 2-chapter preview to see if it's the kind of thing you want to read.
I love that title. Show it again.
Oh,
Because I just love the cover of that book as well. When did you have this book published?
2021, I want to say.
Yeah, I love that cover. It's beautiful.
I've gotten blurry. Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
So, yes, if
It
you go to
got distracted by the colors.
Yeah, you can tell that I'm getting old too. Here's my glasses.
Anyway, gottookmyclothes.com.
Oh, no, I saw myself. Never mind.
It has the 2-chapter preview, and then the entire book in Spanish is there, but my wife and I translated it. So it's kind of, but it's free because it's considered a different book. And then there's a link to my spiritual counseling. And there's also my email. So if anybody has questions, at the time of this recording, I'm still answering all questions via a voice recording I attach to the email. I can't answer all the emails anymore, but I do a little voice recording. So,
and
if somebody absolutely wants the book and they just can't afford it, you can send me an email to book@godtookmyclothes.com, and I'll send you a free PDF copy you can read on your computer. It's not the published version. The publisher has rights to that, but the unpublished version is almost identical. So.
And then I also have my book called The Burning Within. If anyone wants to read my book, it's been forever on Amazon. Goodreads has scored it a 4.85.
Wow, that's pretty good. I think I got like a 4.6. I'm envious.
So it's it would have been 5-star except for one reader. One reader.
And I don't have a book. That's all I got. I got.
So, but thank you everyone for coming. And
yeah,
what is it we always say, Mike?
Well, thank you for coming, David. We appreciate you being on.
Thank you.
And what is it? Yeah, we do always say we'll see you on the other side.
On the other
Pleasure
side.
to be on the show. Thank you.
Yes.